Welcome everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live webinar. My name is Fagan. I'm a licensed advisor at New Zealand Shores. And today we also have my colleague Julia Cook. Morning, Julia.
Morning.
And Charlotte Natouche. Morning, Charlotte.
Good morning.
So Charlotte and Julia are both licensed advisors at New Zealand Shores as well. And we're going to spend about 30 minutes together. We'll try to cover a lot of content. Dozens of questions about the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on people's migration plans. So let's get started. Everyone knows that COVID-19 coronavirus has impacted almost every single country in the world. Some countries more than others, but we're actually quite lucky here in New Zealand. Although New Zealand is heavily reliant on international trade and overseas recruitment of skilled staff, the fact that we're an island has actually allowed for closing the borders completely, but temporarily. So we've been in lockdown for almost 5 weeks now, and we've actually just eased down restrictions from level 4 to level 3, which means a lot of people have just gone back to work. A lot of businesses have reopened just last Tuesday. And we do anticipate further lifting of restrictions around mid-May as we move to level 2 and then on to level 1, being normal life again. The travel ban and the border restrictions will be lifted again progressively, but we'll talk more about this in detail fairly soon. We believe that New Zealand has tackled the crisis in a very effective way. The quick government reaction has been praised in the press worldwide. And we're actually now looking to the future quite positively, I have to say. We're looking forward to living normally again. And it's very likely that New Zealand will soon become an even more desirable destination for migrating to. We deal with many different families and individuals on a daily basis. They all have different backgrounds, circumstances, and histories and plans. And the questions that we got were actually quite diverse. Some have a visa application pending, some are here working already, some just have vague plans about moving to New Zealand. So we're going to try and cover as many of these questions as we can today. So let's start quite generic. I'm going to turn to you, Julia, and ask you, is it still a good time to move to New Zealand?
Absolutely. Yeah, we firmly believe that New Zealand is going to come out of this crisis in a very strong position compared to the other less fortunate countries. Our economy does rely heavily on overseas staff, and there is a shortage of skilled talents here in the country. Sorry. The lockdown measures that have been imposed by the government to tackle COVID-19 will result in an increase in our unemployment. But just because more Kiwis will need a job, it doesn't mean all of a sudden there's going to be plenty of mechanical engineers or diesel mechanics, chefs, teachers. Overseas talent is still going to be needed.
So are applications still being processed? Can you still submit visa applications?
We can submit, but under level 4, INZ put a strict prioritisation of applications. So apart from rare exceptions, only applications for essential health workers or partners of New Zealanders are being processed. This is because these are only going to be granted as an exception to the travel ban that's currently in place. So for people already in New Zealand, there is a temporary variation of conditions process that was only implemented 2 weeks ago, which allows for people to change their employers or change their occupation temporarily. They can't do both. This is only applicable if the employer is an essential business, but we will talk about essential businesses shortly. But under level 3, there should be a progressive lifting of restrictions as INZ staff will trickle back to work shortly, hopefully. And once we reach level 2, hopefully around mid-May, we will see things returning a bit more back to normal.
Okay, so Charlotte, does that mean that now that we're under level 3, is Immigration New Zealand back at work normally?
So some INZ staff are continuing to work out of head office in Wellington. It is a small team. They are processing predominantly urgent COVID-19 related visas. And those are people that have a critical purpose for coming to New Zealand at the moment. So it's a lot of healthcare workers. We aren't expecting to see business as usual for immigration until we get to level 2.
Right. So apart from what visas are actually being processed apart from those essential health workers, are there any exceptions or?
Yeah, so at the moment, they have put prioritization on temporary visa applications for domestic violence victims, partnership category temporary visas. So that's predominantly partners of New Zealand citizens or residents. And that does include reassessments of applications that have already been in process for some time. Full fee paying international students and post-study work visas.
Okay. So, Julie, I have a question from Facebook here. Let's say I have an application in one of the categories that are being prioritized. How long will it take for my application to be processed, typically?
Oh, that's that $1 million question, isn't it? But due to INZ's limited visa processing capacity, the assessment is going to take longer than usual. And as such, I mean, INZ's unable to give indicative timeframes at the moment. It's just too hard to quantify right now. But they do generally process in date order.
So if I put through such an application that is supposed to be prioritized, and I have family that's coming with me as well, are their visas going to be processed at the same time?
Yep,
yeah. If the family have applied all together and they're dependent on the principal applicant application, then yes, they will be processed at the same time.
Okay, so that's quite good, allowing us to travel. Okay.
Yeah.
And Charlotte, so if my application is not in one of the categories being prioritized, when can we expect INZ to start processing them?
So our expectation, and of course this is just our expectation, will be once we move to level 2. The government is reviewing that on the 11th of May. So fingers crossed we drop down another level and it's hopefully business as usual from level 2.
Okay, so here's another case. I put through an application before all that crisis and it's still in the queue somewhere. And I realized that it could be prioritized if I were to submit it today. Can I change it? Can I ask for it to be prioritized?
Yes, you can, definitely. We have lodged a number of prioritization requests for clients who we believe meet the prioritization criteria for the COVID-19 response, and we can help with that. Applications will still be processed in date order, so you will have to take into account that there is other people ahead of you in the queue, but we can definitely assist if you believe you meet that criteria.
Right. Okay. So Charlotte talked a little bit about some partnership visas being prioritized, but let's say, Julia, I applied for a general visitor visa to come and see my partner. Is that likely to be meeting the criteria to be prioritized?
Short answer, no. Only applications relating to the COVID-19 and the application types that Charlotte's already talked about are being processed. So no visitor visas.
Okay. And if, again, okay, so let's say I have a partnership visa application pending, but it relies on my partner's application being completed first. Will my application be completed even if it's not in one of these categories?
No, same answer. It's only those that are relating directly to COVID-19 and the application types that we've already mentioned are being processed. So no, not at this point.
Okay. So Charlotte, why do you think INZ is processing only certain kind of application? Is that just due to the COVID or staff shortage?
Yeah, so at the moment, Immigration New Zealand does still have a series of branches offshore as well as onshore. Because of COVID-19, all of Immigration New Zealand's branches offshore are closed at the moment. So that's taken away a massive potential for processing at present. And then obviously because New Zealand's in level 4 lockdown, was in level 4 lockdown, we're now in level 3. And the New Zealand government is still urging people that if they can work from home, they should work from home. So immigration just at present doesn't have the capacity to be undertaking normal processing. And like I said, once we get to level 2, hopefully business as usual, because that's when at least New Zealand staff can return to offices. What happens with the rest of the world, wait and see, but at least we know here in New Zealand we're on a good trajectory to get back to level 2 in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, so another $1 million question for you, Charlotte. We've talked about temporary visa applications, which for the vast majority implies crossing the border. But what about residence application? Let's say I'm here working already and I have a residence application pending. Is that going to be processed at all? Any chance?
No, residence applications are not processing at present. Residence applications are paper-based applications in most cases, few exceptions, of course. So because paper-based applications require case officers to be in their offices processing, they're not being processed at present. So once again, level 2, business as usual. That's when we should start seeing movement again on those residence applications.
So would there be any benefit in submitting a residence application now still, knowing that it's not going to be looked at for some time?
Yeah, definitely. So Immigration New Zealand, everything goes into queues. Goes into a queue to be lodged. It goes into a queue to be allocated to a case officer. So even if you submit now, and we still can submit physical applications, the couriers are running, they're still delivering. It means that your application will get to Immigration New Zealand. It will go into a queue to be lodged and then into a queue to be processed. So if you submit now, it's probably a good thing, because once lockdowns are over, people will start to sort of re-emerge and probably, want to start sending things again. So if you send now, you're actually probably going to be ahead of a lot of people who will be looking to send their applications once lockdowns are over.
Okay, so if they're actually accepting applications, if I have any sort of document expiring, it's probably my best interest to put it in now, isn't it?
Definitely. So if you have documents which are due to expire, whether it's police certificates, English language test, anything else with expiry dates, 100% you can still submit your residence application, and it is in your interest to do so, because immigration will acknowledge that the application was received before that document expired. So you're not going to get into a tricky situation of having to try and re-obtain things like police certificates, which can be really hard to do with governments around the world not processing a whole lot at the moment.
Okay, so let's look specifically at people who are already here in New Zealand, because these can be impacted as well. We have a few real life situations here from clients or people on Facebook or just via email more generically. Let's say I'm here on a work visa and I found a new job. Can I apply for conditions to get a new visa, Julia?
Well, unless you're an essential health worker, your application is going to get put into the queue, but not processed as yet. So it's still worth submitting, but it won't get into that prioritisation unless you're an essential health worker.
Okay, but what happens if I have an application in, it gets declined or it just got declined, and of course there's very, very few flights, I can't leave the country. How is ONZ going to kick me out, or what's going to happen?
Well, I think they're going to be pretty understanding that the current travel restrictions in place around the world is going to impact people's ability to leave the country. So they're going to look at people's individual circumstances and take that into account when assessing the application. So I don't think they're going to be unfair if you find yourself in that situation.
Okay, so we understand that the variation of condition allows to work for a new employer or in a different region sometimes, or a new occupation, but it's a paper-based application. And Charlotte, you mentioned, well, ONZ's not, they're working remotely, so they're accepting applications, but any paper application is not going to get looked at. What is that new variation of conditions online process that ONZ launched a couple of weeks ago? Is that a new thing, or?
Yeah, it's definitely a new thing. Pre-COVID-19 didn't exist. So basically what that form allows is for people who are working in those essential services, who either need to retain staff or redeploy staff to different roles, or even if you work for one employer who's an essential service and you get a job offer with another employer who's in an essential service, you can submit a variation of conditions application online to change employers. Obviously, the other standard variation of conditions policy applies. So it's not, a massive exemption to go and change regions, etc. But it is there to assist people and employers to help with the COVID-19 effort where they can.
Okay, so it is very much a temporary thing, right? Once the situation becomes normal again, I should go back to my other employer, other occupation.
Yeah, so I have seen one of these variation of conditions approved last week, actually, for one of my clients. And the letter did say that the variation of conditions was only applicable for levels 4, 3, and right through to the end of level 2. And then at the end of level 2, then the previous visa conditions sort of go back into effect. So at that point, if you'd got a new job offer with a different employer, then we would still have to submit that standard paper-based variation of conditions application.
Okay, so I have a case of someone here, Julia. He's employed in New Zealand. The employers have to keep them on, but they have no work for them. So could we use that VOC for the work visa holder to temporarily work for someone else?
Well, work visa holders can perform their current role in a different workplace in the same region to help essential businesses keep operating while we're at alert level 3 or 4 and 6 weeks after that. And that's precisely what the temporary online VOC process is for.
Okay, so these processes essentially only for essential businesses, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's focusing on them, keeping those businesses alive and moving still.
Okay. So we've talked about work visa holders being, in many cases, eligible for that temporary VOC. Would that apply to students in any way, Charlotte, as well?
Yeah, so students or student visa holders are obviously affected by all of this as well. Typically, a student visa allows a person to work up to 20 hours per week or full-time during holiday periods. So that variation of conditions form can be submitted by an individual or an employer to take away that 20-hour restriction and allow students to work full-time at the moment for an essential service.
Okay. So whether a student or work visa holders, I cannot move to another region, right? That would be against the whole COVID-19 logic, wouldn't it?
Yeah, correct. So you can't change regions. You can change, you can go from, let's say if you were a nurse in Hamilton where we're based and you were working at the public hospital and then you got a job offer with a private hospital, then you could apply for a variation of conditions to change employers within the same region, but you can't work in Hamilton and then get a job offer in Auckland and move. With student visa holders, you couldn't be based in Auckland studying and then get a job working 40 hours a week in a supermarket in Hamilton because you're not supposed to move between regions. So it is purely for allowing employment in the region you're currently in.
Okay. So another case for you guys here. If you put through an application and you're currently on a visa and your visa expires before your application is decided, then you, in most cases, automatically switch over to an interim visa until a decision is made on the new application. What if I've done that before the lockdown? So I'm currently in an interim visa, but my application is not going to get processed until level 2 and INZ returns to work sort of normally. I'm currently in an interim visa. Julia, can I do that temporary VOC to, keep busy and work for someone else?
No, afraid not. The variation of conditions is not available to anyone on an interim visa. You just have to sit tight on that interim visa, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. That's not very good news for a lot of people, but I suppose level 2 is not too far away. We've had a lot of inquiries as well about work visa holders who have not yet arrived in New Zealand. Can they apply for a VOC?
No, afraid not. This new special VOC process is only available to those people who are already in New Zealand and already here working. So if they needed to move to between essential service businesses, they can, but not if they're offshore.
Okay, and so, but these work visa holders, their visas were granted from offshore. So typically they would have 3 months to enter the country. And because of those border restrictions, for a lot of them, it's not going to be possible. What is INZ going to do about this?
Well, they're well aware of the issue, but as yet we haven't had any information about how they're going to go about remedying that situation for people. Hopefully they'll put together some sort of online process to extend that entry date, but at this point in time we don't have that information from INZ, so we'll have to share that as soon as we know.
Can I just jump in there? The reason we can't do anything about that at the moment is because, like I mentioned before, a variation of conditions is normally a physical application. In ordinary times where the world wasn't experiencing lockdown, we could submit a physical variation of conditions application to your nearest visa application centre, but they're all closed. So that's why we are very much waiting for that online process, and it's very frustrating that we're still waiting. But yeah, unfortunately, it's just something we can't do anything about at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. So for those people who submitted the visa application before the lockdown, are their visas going to be processed, or they're not unless the business is an essential service?
Yeah, unless a company meets that COVID-19 response criteria and a person's essential worker, they aren't processing those visa applications at present. Once we drop down to level 2 and immigration staff are back in full in New Zealand, then 100% we'll start seeing processing at that time.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that, guys. We're now going to turn to questions that are perhaps a bit more generic, but a lot of people are in that stage where they're thinking about moving to New Zealand, or they're halfway through their documentation, or they have started looking for work already. And a lot of people are wondering whether it's possible, or if it even is a good thing for them to start with the immigration process now. Are they still going to be able to find work and later apply for residency, or are things going to change now with the process and make it, and I'm quoting, almost impossible to get in? How do you anticipate the job market in New Zealand will be like after this situation?
Well, I don't anticipate any major policy changes right now. I think we've got enough to deal with, and New Zealand's always going to need skilled people to sustain and develop our economy and infrastructure. So we have a skill shortage list that partly exists in a way to acknowledge the shortage of staff that we have in certain areas and industries, but immigration may shift the emphasis slightly on a different kind of occupations, and accordingly review those lists to kind of suit regions and industries.
Okay. INZ had that big plan of merging 6 different visa categories into 6 work visa categories into one coming June. Have we heard word that this was going to be postponed at all?
I haven't. Yeah, Charlotte.
No, short answer, no, not yet. I think the minister touched on briefly in a press conference that those changes may, excuse my coffee machine in the background, those changes may still go ahead, but I mean, yeah, it's really a wait and see game. We just don't know what's going to happen or when it's going to happen. Like Julia said, the government's got enough on its plate at the moment without implementing massive policy changes. So watch this space, I guess.
So we're all pretty certain that INZ is going to resume normal processing of application in a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. But what about lifting those border restrictions? It's very well to get a work visa approved in a couple of weeks, but am I going to be able to actually enter New Zealand at that point, Julia?
Well, I can imagine there are hundreds of people sat offshore with their work visas in their little hands, desperate to come. But at this point, the government has not announced when those restrictions are going to be lifted. I know that's probably the most anticipated question that we want answered right now. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what they announce, and announce it as soon as we know.
So we see on Facebook groups and all discussions or rumors about the borders being shut for 6 to 12 months. Is that just fake news, Charlotte?
At this stage, yes. I think there's a lot of speculation going on. It's such an uncertain time. It's unprecedented. No one alive today has lived through a global pandemic, so we just don't know. But yeah, very much fake news. Yes, we can guess, we can put expectations on it, we can try and look at our crystal balls to see what's happening in the future. But until the government actually makes an announcement, we just don't know what the situation is. I mean, it could be 2 months, it could be 4, it could be 6. We don't know.
Okay. I have another question here from Facebook. Someone thinking a little bit outside the box, I must say, which is very good. And the person is asking about the cost to do a 1-year master in New Zealand, and potentially what the benefit of going with a student visa or coming to New Zealand as a student, and then perhaps pursuing with work and residence. Can you tell us a bit about this, Julia?
Yeah, oh, that's a question a little bit that we weren't expecting, and great question, and it's raises a really good points. And I think in the foreseeable future, INZ will prioritise international student applications over most work visas. And the reason for that is that the travel ban has had a real impact on education providers who are now desperate to get their international students back. And almost every person wanting to move to New Zealand is going to need to secure a job. So New Zealand Shores can support you in that process of job searching and coming through as a skilled person, and it works really, really well. But yeah, there's always the alternative to look at the student pathway, and it does give you more certainty in the process, particularly with the timeline, because studying a master's degree, for example, will pretty much secure you 4 years in New Zealand and dramatically increase your long-term goal of securing residency. So with master's degrees can take between 9 to 18 months to complete, and there are international tuition fees that you need to pay, which can be between 30 and 50,000 New Zealand dollars. The key benefits of that, though, is that you get to work up to 20 hours per week while doing your studies, and at the end of it, you get to apply for an open work visa to then move yourself into employment. And alongside that, if you have family, a wife and children, or husband and children, then you can apply for visas for them. So your partner could then have a work visa, and your children, if they're a school age, can attend school, which is fantastic. So it keeps the family together. So yeah, once you've completed your studies, you can then move into the post-study work visa, find the right skilled position to then put you into the residence program at a later date. So it's a very solid pathway for a family to follow. Great idea.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. So essentially, if you have a bit of funds and you want to upskill yourself, you are literally buying yourself, securing 4 years in New Zealand and a lot more certainty for residence. Yeah,
so get in touch with us if that's something that's you can consider. Then definitely get in touch with us. We can help with all of that.
Okay. Thanks for that, Julia. I have a few questions there that popped during this live. Either of you guys can answer, of course. My partner received the job offer on the 5th of March. We're due to apply for our temporary visas. Can we get in the queue, or will the employer have to re-advertise the position? Charlotte, what do you think?
So you can definitely still submit a visa application. Evidence of advertising has to be less than 3 months old at time of application. That's for an essential skills work visa. I mean, obviously, we'd look at the situation and see what type of visa they apply for, but most people apply for essential skills. So I would still recommend submit a visa application. Now you're still going to be in the queue once normal processing resumes. So yeah, go ahead for sure.
Okay. And Julia, so will documents that could expire, like the police clearance certificate, will these have to be renewed, or will there be some leniency if your application is not processed in time?
Yeah, I think if you've got police clearances available, then we'll use them. If they expire, then I think we can definitely still add them to the application to get them into the queue, and then you can follow up with new ones at a later date once normal government agencies are operating again. But for lodgement purposes, we can definitely go with expired ones at this point in time.
Okay. I have another person here who's in an unfortunate situation. From what I gather, the person's here on a work visa, and the person's been made redundant, unfortunately. They have a residence application pending, and they're asking whether INZ will give them enough time to find a new job.
Charlotte? Is there some sort of leniency there? So you're on a current work visa and you have an application pending and you've lost your job. What can happen?
So once again, we don't really know. Immigration New Zealand hasn't come out either way and said this is what's happening. We would expect a degree of leniency. The situation's not your fault. It's not the employer's fault. It's not Immigration New Zealand's fault. So, and there's a lot of people in that situation at the moment. So we would definitely expect some leniency. The other thing is borders are closed at the moment. Around the world, there's lack of flights. So immigration's not going to be turning up at your door with a deportation order notice. So you don't need to worry about that. My recommendation would be start looking for other work, see if anything else pops up. And yeah, the best thing you can do is just try and secure new work, lodge a new work visa. Won't process till level 2, but hey, at least it's in. Otherwise, if you are really struggling with finding new employment, we can submit a visitor visa application as well, and that will, make sure that you've notified Immigration New Zealand of your situation, and then, whilst on that visitor visa, you can continue to search for the right employment and then apply for a work visa.
Okay, so quite a few options, eh? I'm not going to get kicked out of the country next week, anything?
No. Like I said, they're not going to be turning up on your door with a deportation order. So yeah, that's definitely not like a terrible situation to be in. You do have options.
So in the same manner, Julia, we've seen a few clients whose weekly hours have dropped below the required 30 hours. Temporarily in most cases. We should expect some sort of leniency from INZ in that respect too, right?
Oh, I would hope so. I mean, there's going to be, I would say a lot of people are going to find themselves in that situation. So a lot of people are going to be really nervous about that. So I don't think they're going to really be harsh on people. They're going to understand, but what they'll actually do about it, I don't know at this point. They haven't come forward with any guidelines for us on that yet, but yeah, we're aware of it, so I'm sure they're aware of it, and we'll have to come up with some kind of solution.
Another person here, Charlotte, perhaps. The person has a temporary visa expiring in September. They're going to have to renew it, and they're going to need new police clearance and new medicals. The medical facilities in New Zealand are largely closed, and fingerprinting facilities are open. So what are these person's options?
Yeah, so we do know that immigration will accept applications without police clearances at this time. So what we do is we provide a letter in lieu of a police certificate saying, due to COVID-19, we're currently unable to obtain a police clearance. September is still 4 months away, so you do still have time. I mean, things have got to this point quite quickly, so we are somewhat anticipating that things will, of course, improve in another 4 months as well. So in New Zealand specifically, we would expect that medical centres will be open again before then, and who knows, the rest of the world is slowly starting to open up again, so you might be able to get those fingerprints done and obtain that police clearance before you need to submit another visa.
I've got 2-3 more questions. Some are becoming a bit generic, which is great as well. A person there, Julia, is asking, if I'm on an open partnership work visa, can I start a business in New Zealand? They probably saw an opportunity here somewhere.
Yeah, on a partnership visa, you have the option to be self-employed. You can't have any employees, but you can be a self-employed person and start your own business. So yeah, that's an opportunity people could be considering.
Awesome. I have a couple from the UK. They're architects, and they're asking whether they have a chance of obtaining a visa if they can secure a job. I'm guessing the question is long-term rather than right now, but are there good employment prospects for architects?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, there are infrastructure and around the construction industry in New Zealand is one of those industries that's booming right now. So we are desperate for things in the construction sector. So architects, I would put into that category.
Awesome. Another question maybe for you, Charlotte. Persons from South Africa
They're currently working, but also studying for a pilot license, and they're wondering whether they would need both a work visa and a student visa to do the same in New Zealand.
So they're studying as a pilot, sorry, did you say? Yeah. Good question. To continue studying as a pilot, you would need a student visa, but that student visa would allow you 20 hours a week work. So yeah, I guess, yeah, student visa, international student visa with 20 hours per week work.
You can only hold one visa at a time, can't you?
Yeah, you can only hold one visa at a time. So you can't hold both a work visa and a student visa. You can hold a work visa with conditions that allow you to study part-time, or you can hold a student visa which allows you to work part-time.
Awesome. Okay, so before we'll leave it at that, let's go probably more of an open discussion. Do you guys think the worst is over for New Zealand? It's definitely looking very positive from here on, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if New Zealanders do what we've been instructed to do, and keep our social distancing and keep to the rules right now, we have really broken the back of this virus, and we're doing an amazing job with our team of 5 million. We're doing brilliantly. So yeah, I think the worst is over for us.
Sure. I do think that New Zealand will be popping out of this crisis better than most. Like I said earlier, if anything, it will be looked upon as a even more desirable destination, considering how the crisis has been handled. It's not over yet, but it's definitely looking very, very positive. When do you think we're going to come out of it? Like almost completely living normally again, Charlotte?
I'm hoping sooner rather than later. Well, I think indications are good that we will return at least to level 2 within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Like Julia said, as long as everyone does their bit and we keep doing what we've been told to do, which I think, probably 99.9% of New Zealanders are. So personally, my estimation would be level 2 within the next 2 to 3 weeks. How long level 2 lasts, I'm not sure, because that obviously has restrictions on, large gatherings and things. But I would think we are back to living life pretty much normally by the end of the year. Yeah. Whereas a lot of other countries in the world are certainly a lot worse off than we are, and could be facing those social distancing, lockdowns, et cetera, off and on for who knows how long.
Yeah.
Because we were working from home, and still for most of us working from home still throughout the lockdown here at New Zealand Shores. But we've been lodging applications on a daily basis, and we see our clients still getting jobs, aren't we?
Yeah. The guy Friday get a job. He's here on a visitor visa at the moment and was doing his job search and got some good contacts just before we went to lockdown, and he was thrilled to have a job offer put through on Friday. So yeah, that was awesome. So that's one happy family.
Yeah, I've still got I had another guy in exactly the same situation, Julia. Was here on a visitor visa doing his job search trip too. When we went into lockdown, he decided to stay, got a job offer last week as a carpenter. So that's really exciting. But I still have clients who are offshore who are having Skype interviews while we're in lockdown. So it's not that things have completely stopped by any means. Yes, it will be slower for sure. Purely because a lot of businesses are working from home and not a lot's happening. But as we start to move down those levels, things will definitely pick up again. And like Fabian said earlier, migrants are crucial to our economy, and that's not going to stop. So it will ramp back up again in the next couple months.
Yeah, and I think we will have seen some real innovative ideas with new businesses and things where there's going to be sort of staff shortages where we weren't expecting those particular skill sets to pop up. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting time.
Yeah,
but possibly a shift in the skill shortage list, not so much a drop in anything.
Yeah, definitely. I was chatting with a recruiter a couple of weeks into lockdown, and she I mean, obviously, you know, their business with recruitment slower, they're, I expected they'd be in a bit of a tight spot, but she said they've had a lot of jobs which have completely gone off the radar and employers aren't advertising for. But then on the other hand, they're really busy because now there are areas which are screaming out for people. And that was in the technology sector. So, you know, not even necessarily what Immigration New Zealand deems an essential service at the moment. So there is definitely still demand there.
Yeah.
So is now still a good time to work on your migration plans? What can you do until, you know, INZ reopens and the borders reopen? Could someone potentially still re-engage with us and get an assessment, or what could we provide as a service over the next couple of weeks or months?
Yeah.
So
Go on. You go.
I have taken on, I don't know, somewhere between 10 to 20 clients in the last 4 weeks who realize that there are border closures at the moment, but they still really want to move to New Zealand. So what my focus with them at the moment, and I'm sure all other advisors are the same, is that we are working through preparing what documentation they can. Obviously, they can't get some documents due to, you know, governments being closed down and they can't get police certificates and things like that. But we're working on everything else in the meantime. And then once, you know, countries emerging out of those lockdowns, that's when they can go and get their police certificates. And then as soon as we have an idea with what's happening with our border, that's when we'll hit go on that job search phase. Yeah, so there's definitely still a lot of interest. People are still keen, and we can definitely still help you with your migration.
Awesome. Do you guys want to add anything at all? Otherwise, we'll leave it at that.
No, I think I'll just finish with saying there's going to be probably still questions that we didn't manage to cover today. So definitely people should get in touch with us and ask us those questions and see if we can help. And if New Zealand's where you want to migrate to, then please get in touch with us. Yeah.
As a first step, hop onto our website or get in touch with us on Facebook. There's a lot of questions that we haven't had time to cover today, but we'll try and reply to all of you via Facebook if you've posted on Facebook. Otherwise, hop onto our website, get an eligibility assessment from us, or just get in touch and flick your questions by email and we'll get back to you in a day or so. Thanks a lot, everyone, for watching. Thanks for your time, Julia, Charlotte, and see you very soon.
See you later.
Yeah, bye.